Lavender Town is a town in the Pokémon Red and Green games, released in Japan in 1996. It is a small place, marked by a dark atmosphere and for being home to the Pokémon Tower. A tower full of graves of dead Pokémon. A heavy theme, especially considering that the game is aimed at children. What made Lavender Town become a legend was the original soundtrack of this area. Unlike the cheerful songs of the rest of the game, it used high-pitched, dissonant sounds and unusual frequencies, which gave a feeling of discomfort. The melody was disturbing enough to generate several stories among fans, especially in Japan shortly after its release. The most famous of these is known as the Lavender Town Syndrome, or Lavender Town Syndrome. This urban legend said that, soon after the release of the games, Japanese children began to present strange symptoms when they reached this part of the game. Headaches, nausea, anxiety, and in the most extreme cases, suicidal behavior. The story goes that the high-pitched tones used in the original music could only be heard clearly by younger ears, which would have caused neurological effects in some children. Supposedly, this led Nintendo to change the soundtrack in later versions of the game, softening the frequencies and making the sound less high-pitched. In fact, there are differences in the versions of the music, but it has never been proven that they are related to any real case of suicide. To this day, there is no official medical or judicial evidence that proves that these deaths happened because of the game, or that they even happened. Nintendo, for its part, has never commented on the legend. It has never confirmed or denied it. This has only increased the mystery. Over time, the story has spread across the internet, especially with the growth of creepypastas, which are basically horror stories based on games, films, or series. Despite being just a legend, the impact was so great that Lavender Town has become an icon of the darker side of the Pokémon universe. The original song still makes many listeners uncomfortable, and is remembered as one of the most mysterious and disturbing parts of the franchise's history. In short, the Lavender Town suicide legend is probably just a made-up story, but it has grown so much that it has become part of gaming culture. A mix of eerie sound, dark theme, and silence from Nintendo that has fueled fans' imaginations for decades. In 1997, before the official release of Pokémon Gold and Silver, Nintendo presented a demo version of the games at the Space World trade show in Japan. This demo showed a version of the second generation of Pokémon that was still in development, with incomplete maps, provisional sprites, and, most curiously, dozens of Pokémon that were never officially released. These beta Pokémon included alternative evolutions, strange forms, and even concepts that were completely different from what we saw in the final version of the games. For example, there was a pre-evolution of Meowth, a Pokémon that transformed into a drum, and even a prototype of Girafarig with two identical heads, very different from the version we know. For years, this demo was kept under lock and key. Nintendo never publicly released the files or commented on these discarded creatures. It was only in 2018, more than 20 years later, that it was leaked onto the internet by a group of fans who managed to access the original data. What was seen in this leak was a veritable goldmine for hardcore fans. More than 80 previously unreleased Pokémon designs that had been completely forgotten or replaced. Some of these concepts were recycled in future generations, such as Leafeon, which already appeared with a different name and primitive design. Nintendo has never officially commented on this leak, and to this day avoids talking about Pokémon that were deleted or modified. For many fans, this fuels the idea that the company wanted to hide this experimental phase of the franchise, perhaps because it considered that these designs were not up to the mark, or for fear of confusion among the public. Even so, these beta Pokémon continue to be studied, redesigned, and celebrated by fans who see in them a forgotten and fascinating part of Pokémon history. It is a piece of what if that shows how much the franchise could have been different. Missing No, short for missing number, is one of the most famous bugs in video game history and has become a true urban legend within the Pokémon universe. It appears in Pokémon Red and Blue, the first games released in the West, in 1998. Basically, Missing No is a corrupted Pokémon, which shouldn't exist. but can be found through a specific glitch involving the city of Cinnabar Island and the old man who teaches you how to catch Pokémon in Viridian City. What happens is that, when following a certain sequence of steps, the game tries to pull invalid data from memory to create a wild encounter. Since there is no correct information at that point in the programming, the game fills it with garbage data, and that's what generates Missing No. Sometimes it appears as a block of messed up pixels. Other times, as strange sprites of Pokémon mixed together. Despite being a bug, catching Missing No did not crash the game, which intrigued players even more. What's more, fighting him had a very useful side effect for players. He doubled the item in the 6th position of his backpack by up to 20. This became a sort of popular trick to get infinite rare candies, Master Balls, and other rare items. Nintendo, for its part, never officially acknowledged the existence of Missing No as a Pokémon. In manuals and press releases at the time, it only said that using glitches could corrupt game data, but did not explain what caused it or how it worked. It was the efforts of the fan community itself that discovered how to activate the glitch and understand how it operated behind the scenes of the game's programming. Today, Missing No is seen almost as a symbol of the dark and uncontrollable side of the franchise. It represents a flaw that escaped Nintendo's control, but ended up being embraced by fans as part of the story. Even though it was never made official, it is remembered with affection and curiosity, as a mistake that became a myth. In the original Pokémon games, some creature designs drew attention for resembling religious or esoteric symbols, and one of the most notable cases is that of Kadabra. When he first appeared in Pokémon Red-Green in Japan, the character's original sprite included a 5-pointed star on his forehead and a necklace with a cross. These visual elements were removed or discreetly modified in later versions of the games, especially as the franchise began to expand internationally. The star on the forehead could easily be associated with occult, spiritual, or even satanic symbolism, depending on the cultural context. The necklace with the cross was a straightforward religious symbol, which did not fit with the game's idea of being universal and neutral, especially for a young audience. As Pokémon became a global phenomenon, Nintendo became much more careful with anything that could generate religious controversy. In addition, this type of representation could generate misinterpretations in several countries. In an environment like the United States, where many religious communities are wary of content considered inappropriate for children, even small references can become a cause for boycott or scandal. That's why Nintendo chose to change these details quietly, without making any announcements or public explanation. The company has always avoided directly addressing religious themes within the franchise, precisely to avoid causing controversy. And the case of Kadabra is a clear example of how visual content that might seem harmless in one country can have a completely different impact in another, and so ends up being erased from the official history without fanfare. The Pokémon fan community is extremely active, and over the years, many people have dedicated their time and talent to creating fan-made games. Some of these projects have reached an impressive level of quality, with new regions, original stories, unique mechanics, and even new Pokémon. Two of the most well-known are Pokémon Uranium and Pokémon Prism. Pokémon Uranium took over 9 years to develop, and was released in 20. It introduced a new region called Tandor, over 150 new Pokémon created from scratch, and even a new nuclear type. In less than a week, the game had already been downloaded over 1.5 million times. However, the creators quickly received legal notices from Nintendo asking them to remove all download links, based on copyright law. The same happened with Pokémon Prism, another fan-made game that expanded on the Pokémon Crystal universe. Even though these games were free and did not generate any profit, Nintendo was relentless. It used the DMCA Digital Millennium Copyright Act system, a legal tool that allows copyrighted content to be taken down without the need for legal action. And the most curious thing is that the company never engaged in dialogue with the creator. It did not ask for adjustments, did not offer alternatives, it just ordered everything to be taken down, and anyone who did not comply ran the risk of facing legal action. This generated a lot of frustration in the community. Many fans saw these projects as passionate tributes to the Pokémon universe, not as competition or piracy. But from a legal standpoint, Nintendo has the right to protect its intellectual property. The problem is the way it does this. Coldly, silently, and with total censorship, with no room for any kind of collaboration or recognition. That is why, despite the strength of fan games, they always live in the shadow of the fear of being deleted at any moment. Many developers today work anonymously, or keep their projects secret until the last minute, all to avoid Nintendo's legal scythe. Mega Evolutions, introduced in Pokémon XY and Z moves, added in Sun Moon, were two mechanics that won over many fans. They added strategic variety to battles and brought the spotlight to old Pokémon, which gained new forms, powers, and even competitive relevance. However, starting with Sword and Shield Generation 8, these mechanics simply disappeared and did not return in Scarlet and Violet. Nintendo and Game Freak never gave a clear official explanation as to why these mechanics disappeared. They were simply replaced by new gimmicks in each generation. Dynamax and Gigantamax in Sword Shield, and Terastalize in Scarlet Violet. These new features also change the way Pokémon fight, but the pattern has become each generation has a new mechanic, which lasts only in that generation. This has led many fans to believe that the abandonment of Mega Evolutions and Z moves was not a creative decision, but rather a commercial and strategic one. By introducing an exclusive new feature in each game, Game Freak creates a sales differential, something that only that generation offers, encouraging players to buy the new version even if they don't like the change that much. The problem is that Mega Evolutions, in particular, have become extremely beloved. Many players still ask for the return of these forms, which brought unique looks and epic transformations, especially for forgotten or weaker Pokémon. Z moves, on the other hand, divided opinions more, but still had an impact on battles and allowed for new tactical combinations. Nintendo's silence only reinforces the discomfort among fans. There was no official justification, nor promises of a return, just constant replacements. The cycle repeats itself with each generation, creating the feeling that beloved mechanics are discarded without consideration, just to make room for the gimmick of the moment. One of the most curious and often ignored things in the Pokémon universe is the constant absence of father figures. Most of the protagonists, both in the games and in the anime, do not have a father present. In many cases, the father is simply not mentioned, as if he did not exist. This happens with iconic characters such as Red from the original games, Ash Ketchum from the anime, May and Brendan Pokémon Ruby Sapphire, Dawn Diamond Pearl, and many others. In the case of Ash, for example, the anime only mentions his father once, vaguely, and he never appears. No explanation is given about where he is, why he does not live with his family, or if he is still alive. The focus is solely on his mother, Delia, who takes care of him alone, and encourages him to go out into the world at the age of 10. In the games, the pattern is similar. The main character usually lives with his mother, and the father is not even mentioned. There is one famous exception, Norman, Brendan or May's father in Pokémon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, who is a gym leader. But other than that, the father figure disappears completely from most stories. Nintendo and Game Freak have never explained why this happens, but there are several speculations. One of them is that this absence creates more freedom for the player to project themselves into the character. A protagonist with few family ties can go on a journey without restrictions. Another possibility is narrative. A young independent hero fits better into the franchise's style of solitary adventure. But for many fans, this recurring choice raises questions. After all, why are the mothers always there and the fathers not? Why is there never a clear explanation? Nintendo's silence on this only reinforces the idea that the disappearance of the parents is a deliberate choice, but one that the company prefers not to comment on, perhaps to avoid deeper debates about family structure or abandonment. In the end, the absence of the parents has become a silent and strange characteristic of the franchise, something that is always there, but that no one officially acknowledges. Mewtwo is one of the most iconic and, at the same time, one of the darkest Pokémon in the franchise. Its origin involves cloning, genetic manipulation, and existential questions. Very heavy themes, especially considering that Pokémon is a series aimed at children. In the original games Red Blue, it is possible to find diaries in the abandoned laboratory on Cinnabar Island. These records tell that Mewtwo was created from Mew's DNA, as a result of scientific experiments that went wrong. In the first Pokémon film, released in 1998, this story is deepened. Mewtwo is shown as an artificially created being, with immense powers, but without a clear purpose. He goes through an identity crisis, rebels against his human creators, and questions his place in the world, even concluding that the existence of clones is unfair. The film is surprisingly serious. Mewtwo destroys laboratories, kills scientists, and provokes reflection on ethics, cloning, and the value of life. All this in a product aimed at a child audience. The impact was so great that despite the film's success, Nintendo and the Pokémon Company never delved into this type of content again in subsequent generations. Mewtwo continued to appear in games and films, but always in a more superficial way, without re-exploring the existential and scientific themes of its origin. The very idea of cloning practically disappeared from the franchise, even though it has enormous potential for storytelling. It's as if Nintendo realized that it had touched on subjects that were too serious for the light tone it wanted to maintain in the series, and so it preferred to leave all of this in the past, without revisiting or developing it. Despite this, many older fans remember the first film as one of the most remarkable moments in the franchise, precisely because it dared to go beyond capture and battle. Even so, to this day Nintendo avoids directly discussing the themes of cloning, genetic manipulation, or bioethics, treating all of this as part of Pokémon's dark past that they prefer to leave buried.